From birth to death, the Russian state is everywhere. It gives you free education, free healthcare, subsidized housing, maternity benefits, and a pension. It regulates what you can say, what you can watch, and sometimes even how you should live. For some, this is comfort, but for others, that's control. Critics will call it paternalism, a state that treats citizens like children, always needing guidance and protection. Supporters might call it responsibility, the idea that the government should care for people and not leave them to the market's mercy. But in recent years, that paternalism in Russia has gone digital and deeper. Cameras watch every street corner. Foreigners must now give a voice sample to buy a SIM card. Every bank account, license, and government service runs through Gosuslugi, the state's online portal. The government also sets price controls, dominates key industries through state-owned companies, and promotes patriotic education from an early age. It's an ecosystem where convenience, order, and ideology all reinforce each other. For most people, this feels normal. Life is stable, services are efficient, and rules are predictable. But beneath that order lies a question. When does care become control? Is Russia becoming a nanny state or just a highly organised one? And how much of this is protection and how much is supervision? This week, we explore how far the state's presence reaches, from hospitals to housing, from the classroom to the smartphone, and whether Russians truly want a government that's always watching, even when it's helping. My name is Jonny Tickle.
I'm Jeremy Morris.
And I'm James Pearce.
So I've been thinking about this idea of Russia as a nanny state first since I came up with the idea for this podcast. And I've come up with a sort of theory. I'm going to call it Tickle's theory of the Russian nanny state. And it has four overlapping layers, each serving a different purpose, but all working together to create that feeling that the state is always there. So the first layer I'm going to call bureaucratic and institutional control. So that's the paperwork and the procedure side of the Russian state. You have to register where you live, even for short stays. You're meant to carry your passport everywhere. Everyday things like renting a flat, opening a business, changing jobs are all highly bureaucratic. And because most people work in or around the public sector, which ties income and stability to state institutions. That's also a part of it. And even now with Gosuslugi, as I mentioned in the intro, integrating everything from healthcare to taxes, that bureaucracy has gone digital. The second layer is surveillance and information management. Russia has one of the most extensive CCTV and facial recognition systems in the world, especially here in Moscow. Online censorship and speech controls are growing tighter. The foreign agent label is used to mark out anyone seen as politically unreliable. And since every SIM card, bank account, and online service is linked to a verified ID, it's very easy for the state to keep track of who is who. The third layer is economic and social paternalism. And here the state plays the role of a provider. Prices for essentials like bread and petrol are capped. Families and veterans get generous benefits, and many industries from oil to banking are still state-owned. Even private firms often depend on government contracts or political connections. It's like a managed economy built around the idea that the state knows best how to look after its citizens. And then there's fourthly, the final layer is moral and cultural regulation. It's where the state positions itself as a guardian of values, censoring films and concerts it deems immoral. It runs patriotic education programs in schools. It regulates everyday behavior through laws and public messaging. And you can see that in all sorts of restrictions, whether it's alcohol or anti-smoking campaigns or signs telling you not to sit on the grass. It's like a constant supervision dressed up as a moral guidance. So that's the four layers that I came up with: bureaucratic, surveillance, economic, and moral. I think together they create a kind of invisible safety net for Russians. It's strong, it's stable, it's often comforting, but that's also one that's very impossible to leave if you want to. So I'm interested in hearing your thoughts about about Tickle's theory of the Russian nanny state.
Thanks, Johnny. Wow. I was making notes because I think you've pretty much nailed it. I mean, they overlap, these things. Some of them work in very different ways at the same time, but I think it's quite useful what you've kind of detailed there to kind of demystify a lot of what people outside Russia think, that it's a kind of Wild West, land of opportunity, land of kind of entrepreneurial opportunity, right? Because especially the first point, right? Bureaucracy. This is something that I think Russians and those of us that live in Russia get used to far too quickly. And for me now, the fact that I have to fill out by handwriting, various forms, like you said, as a foreigner, there are various biometrics that are collected, and that's very onerous and also highly intrusive and extremely problematic, because essentially, particularly foreigners, can be traced anywhere through face recognition systems, because the Russian state has a better scan of our heads than any other country in the world now, right? So I think it's easy. There's two things, right? It's easy from the outside to think that, oh, Russia's not actually like this. Russia's this really cool, free place of freedom, and in many ways it is. But your intervention is a good reminder that bureaucracy is extremely burdensome for foreign and for Russians, right? And I wanted to also say that, reiterate that for Russians and people in Russia, we kind of get used to this burden, but it's not a good burden. James?
Well, yeah, it starts from the moment you turn up, with just the registration, and the rules around that have tightened. Depends what kind of status as a foreigner you have as well. So, I mean, if you've got RVP, the rules are a bit different. If you've got Vidna жительство, which...
What's that?
RVP is temporary residency. So you can apply for it either after 2 years of living in 2 uninterrupted years, or if you're married, you can apply for it immediately. But the documentation you have to submit for that. So you need not just a police report from where you're from, but a specific type of police report. You have to get medical tests, not just any you have to go to a particular hospital and then get them notarized and get them translated. And from particular places, you have to get them translated and notarized. You can't just go to any notary. So in that sense, there's a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy with all of these, as Johnny quite well, I think, tied them together. They're all interlinked, the notaries, the hospitals, the government, and then there's the pension, and they all, so it's a very good social safety web in that sense. Now, I mean, the things that I have the most experience with, I suppose, I mean, if we talk about just the cultural side now, is it that different to the West, what kids do with their homework? Now, every school kid, their parents have access to this VLE, all right? And most schools are moving to Max now, that new messaging system where the teachers can interact with them and send the homework. I mean, British secondary schools do a similar thing. Some of that was because of COVID, but it was moving that way anyway, because then it sort of removed that, I suppose, plausible deniability that you had in the UK. It was like, well, they didn't do their homework because of this, but I can see you saw it, so you could have. So there is, some of it's fairly innocent. I mean, what bothers me, and again, there is the patriotic education, and it is being forced on schools more now. Like, they have to do it. Many schools say they did it, but it's like, if you've got, say, a kid, it's like, well, I see your child didn't really do well at this patriotic thing. Why was that? That, I can see, that might worry me a little bit. But I'm not sure we're quite there yet. I mean, until you're actually forcing kids to join these or until you're forcing them to get a certain score on a history test, or, if you have to answer a question a certain way on an exam, I don't think we're quite there yet. Certainly from what I've seen in my research, they're trying to force a right answer. If that right answer then becomes, oh, the government can access what you said on your exams at any time, that would, anyway, go on, John.
Yeah, I mean, there are academics who are, I guess you could call them experts in this sort of youth education, patriotic education type of thing. And so, and I'm not one of them, but I do know people who, I know children who are part of these things. And I can tell you, they don't join them for any patriotic reason. It's like going to the Scouts to hang out with your mates on a Tuesday evening. That's what it's like. It's if it wasn't fun for the kids, they wouldn't go. They're not going because they're 13, 14-year-old huge patriots. It's not about that. So that's what I think. That's what I'd say about that. But I think one interesting thing about this topic we're talking about today is how it really neatly ties up to one thing we talked about in the past, which was how convenient it is to live in Moscow. Because I think what makes all of this so effective is how it hides behind the sort of illusion of convenience. Because people don't feel controlled, they feel assisted. For example, Gosuslugi, it makes life genuinely easier. Like you can renew a passport or pay a parking fine in minutes. But at the same time, every action is logged, it's linked to your direct identity, to your passport. It's sort of a clever trade-off where the state gives you total visibility. Now, you give the state total visibility in exchange for you getting efficiency. And most people don't mind because it works so well. Even for foreigners, we can now get registered online. Your landlord, your landlady can register you in your apartment without actually having to go in person and register you. It's the convenience which makes this sort of creeping surveillance so easy.
Yeah, and it's easy to get stuck in that system, isn't it? So like, oh, I do this online. Okay, that's done. Okay, oh, this lawyer is good for this thing. Okay. Oh, I'll go to this my documentary because when you have it, you were talking about the maternal benefits. It's different, the amount in different regions. So I think Sverdlovsk region where Yekaterinburg is, I think it's, what is it, like 300,000 for, or something like that you get as a payment. Sometimes you can put it towards your house. But I mean, yeah, it's this aura of, oh, it's so easy, just turn up and bring all of this copious amounts of paperwork, and there it is. And they're selling that at schools with Max as well. It's like, oh, it's going to be so much easier because and you can contact me anytime, the teacher, if you need to know something. And I'll be honest, I mean, it is easy because, I mean, you can access these things from abroad and you can access them anytime. So, I mean, it's not just the aura, it's that it is easier. But again, just to bring the UK as a comparison here, we have Gov UK, where you can do the same things. You can renew your passport online. You can pay additional tax, or you can sort your taxes online. I mean, and the UK is a democracy. So, is that just the only difference? I mean, go on, Jeremy.
Wow. So we're kind of moving on to the surveillance topic that Jonny flagged at the beginning. But yeah, I wanted to just chip in on the patriotic youth that you both you both talked about, and we've talked about before. And I'm not like a huge specialist on this, but obviously I know the kind of work that Jonny alluded to. So there is good research on youth incorporation, right? And as Jonny said, Jonny nailed it. What a lot of the, I would say, more politically biased scholarship completely ignores is that in all countries, you have a load of young people that want to meet other young people and be part of something. And it's nothing to do with patriotism, and it's nothing to do with indoctrination, actually. And there is a good literature on this as applied to Russia. Julie Hement, I think, in Canada. She wrote a whole book about Putin's youth, debunking this frankly patronizing and rather ridiculous view that, unlike the American youth that join the army because they want to join the army, unlike British youth who join the Scouts because they want to make the world a better place, Russian youth are different. they join these patriotic organizations because they're, rabidly indoctrinated. So she debunked that. And I wrote a little bit about this in the beginning of my book that just came out.
And it really is quite condescending, isn't it? Because it's like it's this idea that Russians can't think, that they're incapable of having their own opinion, and that the teachers are blindly following all, and that's just so condescending, isn't it? Go on.
So like just to kind of round it out a bit, right? So you can't, these people that take this politically biased line, they can't have it both ways, right? They want to say that everybody's indoctrinated at the same time as they say that there's no civil society, right?
Right.
The reason that young people might join a patriotic group is precisely because there is a bit of a vacuum. And so they want to be part of an organization. And yes, it just so happens that in less democratic states, the state has its finger in the pie of every NGO, so-called NGO. Of course, they're not NGOs. That doesn't mean there isn't autonomy within NGOs to kind of do their own thing, a little bit under the radar, have their own agenda, right? And this is just, like you said, it's condescending. But that was what I wanted to say about patriotic youth. Indoctrination has obviously failed when it comes to young people in Russia, for obvious reasons, and anybody that argues against that, in my view, is an idiot. So there you go. So a little bit of a, because I'm triggered again, like last time. I'm triggered because this is like very close to my heart, and I'm really glad that we talked about it. But nanny state, I want to come back then to the second topic that Johnny switched us to, rightly, surveillance. Absolutely. It's insidious and pernicious because, as you said, once you've got it on your phone, the app that is the gateway to everything, it becomes like you said, a kind of dependency, right? And you don't have to have a government app on your phone in the UK to do your taxes, to make doctor's appointments. And some people, of course, would like that, right? Same in Denmark. I mean, you have here, Denmark, you do have like a state email portal that you have on your phone, and you need that because all communication is done through that. But that is good also because it avoids fraud. Right. But going back to Russia, the problem is that now the state has woken up after many, many years. So it first of all, as you guys know, Russia was at the forefront of joined up IT, particularly through telephony, right? And that was a great selling point of its young developers, right? Now, of course, the state finally has woken up to the way that this can control people. And so the rollout of Max, which is a substitute for WhatsApp or Telegram, the two main messaging services currently being used in Russia. That, again, will be insidious in that people will have to have it, as you said, to talk to their child's teachers, to talk to their doctors, to talk to their work colleagues, right? In work, it's mandated. But that will then be linked to Gosuslugi, the state portal, and it will just be part of this bloat on one's phone that makes it almost impossible for your average person to avoid ever not being monitored. And again, people will say, naive Westerns will say, well, that's not a big deal. But again, we're talking about everything in your financial life, everything in your private life can be used against you in states where the rule of law is subject to political interference. But I'm starting to lecture, so let's move on to Johnny.
I think what's interesting about this is the Russian nanny state actually isn't new. It's just evolving. Like the Soviet version was overt, it was bureaucratic, and the modern one is sort of digital and psychological. The old system relied on paperwork, physical oversight, and today it relies on data and automation. But the outcome is the same. The state doesn't need to tell you what to do because the systems around you already nudge you towards the right behavior constantly. And I think what's fascinating now is the rhetoric which is used to justify it. Every new rule is framed as protection, protecting children, protecting morality, protecting public safety, protecting people from fake news. It's a sort of governmental paternal instinct which seems to repeat over and over again. The state knows best. And I think it is getting worse. I think the pandemic accelerated it. QR codes and digital passes, expanded surveillance, and all of those systems never went away. The war actually intensified it even more, and the logic now is that national security justifies everything.
Yeah. Yeah, just on that, there's a lot of literature about this idea of a masculine Russian state, but the feminine motherly nation. I'll just put that if people want to go and do their own homework on that. It's very interesting topic that, the state looks after you as a father might, and the nation, Mother Russia, cares and gives the love and the nourishment. But just a couple of things on what you've both said. I mean, about the autonomy from this, because I mean, we should tell our listeners, you can still go to the bank and pay for stuff. You can do it on the machine. That's still possible. But of course, the banks are hooked up with the state apparatus. I think there's only a couple of private banks really left in Russia that are not, don't have some sort of state involvement. For instance, I was paying my bills this morning. I was just telling Johnny before we started recording. So another way of doing it is, so like you might have, say, a living complex or a group of buildings that's built by a particular developer. Let's just say the Sonara Group. I'm not saying that's who runs my building. It's just an example because they're in the city. Right, so you can go to that website, there's a section for bills, and you can do it that way. So, which is what I did. I just logged on and, bills have gone up as well, by the way, just in case anybody's interested. So there is that. There's also, and Jeremy picked up on this, and I think, Johnny started to. People want to do jobs that they know are going to be both profitable and that are going to be worthwhile. And a lot of the times now in Russia, that is state companies, state enterprises, the public sector. Because there was an article in The Economist just this week, how to get ahead in wartime. Now, what it neglected to mention was a lot of the time getting ahead in Russia means playing the game. It means becoming a part of the system. As Jeremy said, these organizations, they do have degrees of autonomy and they do have free-thinking people within them that, they're not just blindly following orders. And that's worth, I think, talking about. But again, as well, about the nanny state, we should also probably mention we in the West have a different understanding of what the nanny state is and does. All right.
Exactly.
Now, Western socialists might think of the nanny state, it used to be public money, now it's the taxpayer money. So in Britain, it was, the Attlee government's cradle to grave. You kind of have that in Russia, but again, it's not really the same thing that, say, Labour 1945 had in mind. And it's certainly not what right-wing forces claim it is either. But Jeremy, go on, you're exploding with...
Yeah, no, I'm always exploding nowadays because these topics are so good. I'm so glad that Johnny started from these 4 topics because I think they're really, really, really relevant to anybody that really wants to get an unfiltered view. But your point, James, is also really important because nanny state is an imposition. I think it does make it legible to British people in particular, but it is not exactly what we're saying. Because like you said, the nanny state is this benign, initially benign post-war vision of inclusivity and care, right? Associated with institutions like the National Health Service in the UK. Now, of course, the Soviet Union did have comprehensive universal welfare state. My point would be that Russia doesn't have that. At least, of course, it says it does, but it doesn't. So nanny state isn't quite right. Nannying, intrusive, meddling, controlling, that's what I think Johnny is really getting at in his list of things. And And it's interesting that you said, Johnny, there's this this kind of like always a push to get people to comply because of surveillance, right? And I would say, of course, that works up to a point, right? Because again, as you said, James, one thing you can say about Russians, if we were going to resort to cultural stereotypes, which we always avoid, is that they're incredibly resourceful at, yes, keeping the state close when it suits you, when you need to get maternity benefits or a payout of some kind or access to a doctor, but also keeping the state at arm's length in other ways, because every Russian person knows that the state is not really your friend, right? Again, because you may not have been one of the hundreds of thousands of people whose family were decimated in the 1930s, but everybody knows somebody who was arbitrarily repressed by the state, right? So Russians have this very, very Janus-faced, like dualistic attitude towards the state. And again, this emerges in the scientific literature, right? So it's interesting, Johnny, saying about nudging people, but that has its limits, right? And so it also means that the state is fundamentally weak, because the more it tries to control, the more people both avoid compliance, but also offer superficial compliance. And this goes back to the whole thing about parents in chats with teachers saying, yes, of course, little Ivan will come to the patriotic event where a veteran of the special military operation will be giving a very important talk. Of course, little Ivan, my little Ivan, he'll be attending that. Don't you worry. So compliance becomes superficial in a way that then actually undermines the power of the state, because the state, and this also goes back to 2022 and the decision to invade Ukraine, the state then makes mistakes because it assumes it has a high level of compliance.
Yeah, I think what we're really talking about is a shrinking space for autonomy. Now, maybe it was a mistake to use the word nanny state when I started this, because I know nowadays people argue, academics argue, journalists argue, is Russia totalitarian? Is Russia fascist? Is Russia authoritarian? And people argue about all those things. And I would say, really, there's the space for genuine independence, whether that's economic or personal, is shrinking. Like, you can't run a completely private business without any state involvement. You can't talk about certain things without risk. You can't even sing some songs on the street without risk. You can't move through public life without a digital footprint. So it's definitely not totalitarianism in the old sense that way a lot of people think about it. It's a kind of managed autonomy where freedom exists, but inside clearly defined boundaries.
Yeah, we moved from
I don't think any of those
to managed autonomy. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe I don't really like the terms fascism, totalitarianism, authoritarianism when we're talking about Russia. It's because it's a lot more complicated than that. And I think maybe nanny state's the wrong term for it as well. I'd be interested to know what you two think about what you could call it. What's a better term for what we're talking about?
Well, it's interesting because, I mean...
Paternalism. Yeah. You said it before, Johnny. Paternalism.
It's paternalism.
Yeah, perhaps.
Yeah, state paternalism. But, I mean, it still lacks that, as Jeremy was hinting at. There's that lack of a unifying idea that the population can hang on to. So it's like... okay, they support it when they need to, but the ideas behind it now in the Soviet Union, for a while there was communism, but people stopped believing in that in the 60s and the 70s. The Great Patriotic War, because it was something that everyone endured together, that became a great unifying force, and it still is. But, I mean, you can't use that to create a whole welfare system, can you? Now, in Britain, there was this understanding that the 20s and the 30s were terrible, and that, Churchill had the famous quote, hunger and squalor and the cold were also free and people wanted something more than liberty. So the welfare state was built on the assumption that we need to look after our citizens better, and we have to rebuild after the war. I mean, it's paternalism, but to what end? It's trying to enforce loyalty. It's trying to enforce loyalty, which is never quite a good thing. Just one more thing, just before I forget this, because if we're going to talk about a nanny state as well, let's talk about disabled people in Russia, because you don't see too many of them on the street, do you? And it's not that they don't exist; it's just that they can't get out of their homes, and that there is less support, and there's less support for like SEND and autism and things like that. Jeremy.
Well, absolutely. This comes back to a point that I really wanted to get across, that there's a facade of a comprehensive welfare state in Russia, but behind that facade there is complete inadequacy of care outside Moscow. And also, as you said, James, again, many books have been written about the invisibilizing of disabled people, of people with other less visible disabilities, right? If we're going to talk about the kind of things that you were saying. And this is a continuity, because disabled people in the Soviet Union suffered the same fate because they were embarrassing to the system. And also for more than one reason, they were embarrassing to the system. But primarily, there's this continuity in that the paternalistic state says that it can provide, but it very rarely lives up to paternalistic expectations itself. And this means that those paternalistic desires, and we could debate how real they are, how strong they are, then get transferred onto other objects. And this is what Jonny was talking about in his third point, which is economic paternalism, right? Because, again, there's a big research literature on economic paternalism through Russian people's attachment, and we mean that kind of like, figuratively as well as literally, to a firm, to a company, to an organization, to an institution in the broadest possible sense. So maybe, Jonny, you want to elaborate on that third point that you proposed for us?
Yeah, I think state ownership isn't just about money, it's about leverage. I mean, when half of the country, or something like half of the country, depends on public sector salaries, benefits, subsidies, political control becomes almost automatic. You don't need overt repression when livelihoods already rely on loyalty to the system. And I think that really underlies this sort of paternalism. And then you also have the PR aspect of it too. It's like these price caps on essentials, things like this, which if there's a problem, a few supermarkets are raising prices about something, you'll get a politician going on TV saying, these capitalists are out of control, we're putting a cap on the price of this or that, and it gets a good reaction most of the time. So I think those are like the two sides of it, where there's a sort of reason that you're sort of forced to agree to this paternalism, because without it, what are you going to do?
Well, exactly. I mean, there's plenty of retail jobs if that's what you want. Go at that, which, I mean, not particularly caring in that kind of thing. I mean, but there's also, just coming back to this illusion of care as well, and economic self-care. So when I was teaching, at the start of every year, you have to go to the polyclinica to get some medical tests, and you have your medical book. We all carry those around with it. I mean, so this, as John said, it was there anyway. So you visit all the doctors. So you'll go to the urologist, you'll go to the dentist even. You go to, who else was there? There was a bunch of different, but you also have to give like samples of...
the person who asks you if you've taken drugs recently.
The psychiatrist. You have to roll your sleeves up to prove you've not been...
Yeah.
I mean, I remember the last time I went, she was like, so how's everything? Is everything okay? I was like, are you okay? You don't look it. But yeah, so
But after 10, 15 seconds, they write down in the book, "Yep, okay, start."
yeah, it seems all right. Yeah, but yeah, it's like that illusion that we're taking care of you, dear teachers. And when it comes to the economic care side of things, now a lot of pensioners get bonuses, particularly around election time, particularly around important parts of the year. Hospital workers get them. So again, it's creating that, if you participate in the system, you are taken care of. And don't get me wrong, this money matters. It's sums of money that makes a difference to people. But the state can afford this anyway, and yet they're not. And but there's no political discourse on that. It's like, well, if you can afford this level of welfare, why is it not going into, an actual robust welfare system?
I think there is. I mean, I think there is a discourse. There is, the biggest political grumble that Russians have is that the state pretends to look after them and then doesn't, right? And whatever happens in the future, a populist politician is going to have, if a populist politician rises to a position of prominence in the future, right? And we know that will probably happen at some point. It will be through articulating this deep-seated unhappiness with the failure of the state to live up to its rhetoric and its pretensions, right? Because, I mean, I think we should, in a future podcast, I think we should talk about the cost of living again. Because it's not so much that inflation on food staples is out of control, right? It's that the rise in utilities and taxes and fees has been unprecedented in the last 6 years. And now I just wanted to say that I was just talking to somebody yesterday, and he's a pensioner who lives with his wife, and they're both pensioners, and they live in Kaluga region, and they're paying nearly $100 a month equivalent for their essentially council tax, right? Essentially their communal services, right? And that includes gas, electricity, and water, rubbish collection,
concierge,
antenna payment. There's no concierge in these places. But yeah, it also for the maintenance of the video doorbell that in the common area. But putting that into context, that's a huge percentage of their pensioners' income, right? So that is a real pinch point for a lot of people politically, because they can see the cynicism and the, frankly, uncaring nature of the vast majority of politicians, because there's such a big divide between ordinary people and politicians. Indeed, more so than in many other countries. So I just wanted to say that. At the same time, while we're on this kind of economic paternalism topic, that's why people kind of rush to embrace the corporate life, right? Those people of working age, because it offers them maybe something that the state doesn't offer them. And again, people could be, we could be really condescending and say, oh, it's like ridiculous the way that people express this loyalty or perform a kind of loyalty to their workplace. But that's because they might get benefits there that they can't get from the state. I mean, I always tell this story to my students. In the 1990s, when I was working in Moscow, I could save so much money because my employer gave me a 4-course meal at work in the afternoon. Yeah, what would we get? We would get a soup. We would get a meat and veg. We would get a side of kasha, obviously, of buckwheat, right? Buckwheat side. Yeah. And we would get some kind of sour fruit dessert. And we would get coffee. And coffee was expensive. So it's quite hard for people to understand this tradition and history of the workplace providing something that is real, right? That actually benefits you. And there's even a term in the literature, social wage, right? You get some benefits in kind. And this compensates for you having a very low wage. And I had an extremely low wage, even though it was indexed into dollars. And this continues today. And this is why people think about paternalism in a particular way, and paternalism outside the state, because the state, frankly, a lot of people view the state as only there to take away things from them.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about people wanting to go to the corporate world, because so much of the corporate world is actually government owned. If you go to Moscow City, the main like banking sector here, area of Moscow, there's huge towers which are owned by banks, like VTB has a couple of them. People there, it's like a normal corporate job, but it's owned by the state. So it's even in the corporate world, you just can't get away from the state and the influence of the state. And if you walk around Moscow during Christmas time, in fact, the Christmas trees are going up right now, you'll see Christmas trees that are sponsored by banks, and it's government-owned banks. So it's the state is just everywhere, and they're being told, the companies are being told by the state, you have to sponsor a Christmas tree this year. So they go to businesses that are like nominally independent and tell them, right, this square needs a tree. No one's signed up to a tree. It's your turn this year. Your bank logo is going to be on that tree.
Yeah, the government I just remember when I got married, for instance, and obviously if you go to the ZUX, the registry office, there's a lot of state symbols and memorabilia around, and in the service themselves, there's a couple of buzzwords. After I got married as well, my wife got a phone call from the local FSB. Can we have a chat about nothing bad, but it's, just wanted to, these things happen. Just wanted to talk about your husband. Is everything, and they just asked us stuff like, how long has he been here? How long have you been together? Of course, they probably knew the answers anyway. But it's, that wouldn't happen in the UK if you marry a foreigner, unless you're trying to do some sort of, scam marriage, which, I wasn't. And, but we had nothing to hide. We, very happily went down there and, to the centre of the city. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
We've got the fourth rung on Johnny's ladder to talk about in our remaining time, and that is moral regulation. Again, hugely talked about in the West, sometimes horribly misunderstood, I would certainly argue. At the same time, Jonny, maybe you should run down what you had in mind for this.
Well, really, I'm thinking about musicians being banned, so that means you can't hear. Not only can't you hear them on the radio, not only can't they have concerts, but if someone plays one of their songs when they're busking on the street, they can be arrested. It's also with films and TV. Right? It's happened like last week. Yeah, it happens with film and TV shows as well. So sometimes they're just not allowed to be shown. Other times, part of the movie is censored. Like if you watch, you can turn on Kinopoisk, which is like a Russian version of Netflix, basically. Yeah. But it's sometimes a movie will just skip a scene because. There's something to do with drugs or something of a sexual nature, and you think you can't work out where the plot has gone because like part of the plot has disappeared. So when I was thinking about moral and cultural regulation, I was thinking really about music, films, things that people enjoy in day-to-day life, everyday behavior which is just regulated or managed through laws or even just public messaging.
Well, obviously, if you go to the theatre or even on the First Channel, it will say like, there'll be images of alcohol in this thing. Alcohol is bad. I mean, that's one thing. but like certain plays have to get approval. I mean, that was the same in the Soviet Union. So you go to that, what was it, House of Film or House, what was it called? House of Culture. And you'd have to discuss with. I mean, that's coming back a little bit, but I mean, there's. What was interesting was Ivan Viripayev at the start of the in 2022. So his plays were banned in Moscow and in Yaroslavl, but they were held at other theatres and in other towns. So I mean, I think sometimes, and I had this debate years ago with my students about the nature of freedom of speech in Russia. It's like, in Russia, freedom of speech is often associated with anti. So you have anti-Kremlin, anti-Putin, anti-this, anti-that. I mean, of course, if I express, if I walk out onto the street and say I support Putin, that's still freedom of speech, isn't it? But when you come into the kind of arts world, I mean, there's not so much corporate censorship as you get in the West. That doesn't exist, but you have to still work within okay, well, you want to put on a play about this. Okay, well, who's going to see it? Okay, lots of people in this part of this. Okay. So, and that's kind of what Hyde Park Corner is about as well. It's like, okay, well, let this idiot stand on there, have his audience. He goes home. He says, I gave them what for. It's a similar sort of logic. It's like, okay, play this regional theatre. Have your play there. 20 or 30 people will see it. That's different.
Can you?
Yeah, but
James,
I think one thing that. No, you go ahead. You go ahead.
Sure, James. Can you just clarify what you mean by more corporate restrictions in the West?
So
I didn't understand.
So when a company will withdraw its advert from a show or from a film, or when as Johnny was saying, I'm going to buy this Christmas tree. Oh, I'm withdrawing my endorsement from your football team because of. That doesn't really exist in Russia, corporate censorship. I mean, you can argue sanctions was part of that, corporate censorship, but it didn't really do much. I mean, IKEA leaving Russia, I mean, okay, well, Russia has Hof, and it has other furniture, so that was a really good idea. You've just surrendered the market, but, sorry.
Who owns Hof? Who owns Hof?
Don't know.
German.
Okay, Johnny, go ahead.
Okay, there you
go. One of the things that Russian politicians, when they like to talk about the degenerate West, they'll go on TV and they'll talk about cancel culture. And I think Russian cancel culture has been out of control since 2022. You only have to do one tweet or say one wrong thing, or even just appear to be do something immoral. I'm sure you all remember the Naked Party, or the Almost Naked Party, which saw like 25, 30 different celebrities just banned from TV, kicked off the New Year TV shows, their parts of movies totally removed. Like, cancel culture here, when it comes to this topic, is just absolutely massive since 2022, and it doesn't stop.
And can I just say, once again, we get Russia wrong in so many different ways. The collective we. And I would include myself there. And again, one of the things is thinking that this started in 2022. The rollout of state-sanctioned homophobia is more than 10 years. It's like 2012 approximately. But just in terms of visibility of not even people that are gay, but people that could be criticised as representing this degenerate Western lifestyle, this idea of a degenerate Western lifestyle. Yeah. There was a blacklist in Channel 1 going back to before 2012, right? So, it's always been there, this moral regulation. I wouldn't even call it, well, I think you used that word, moral regulation, Johnny.
Yes, I did. Yes,
and again, it's complex. It's not just about politically distracting the population by blaming the West for the gay plague and all these other things that obviously we would see if we were consuming Russian media in, say, media studies, critical media studies, political science. There's loads and loads of literature about this conservative turn, culture war, the rollout of social conservatism by the state as a way, essentially, of distracting the population from the real problems in Russia. It's actually more complicated than that, but it also goes back to way before Crimea or the current, confrontation.
Of course, yeah.
But I think, Jonny, again, you're really onto something to say that is an essential topic that would have to be part of one of these. It's one of these 4 columns supporting this edifice of the nanny state or the regulating state, right? Telling people what is good and bad behaviour and then policing it in the public sphere.
Yeah.
And increasingly in the private sphere as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously societies will always react to things they perceive as a threat. Governments as well. So, I mean, in that sense, that's not novel. About the blacklist, I think in 2012, the First Channel had about 7 people blacklisted. It was a very small number. Now it's probably more than that.
Yeah. It was a small number, but it was definitely also around morality.
It was around morality and things like that. And coming back to like media censorship, I mean, if you take, so you've got Kommersant, RBK, Открытая газета, Независимая. If you just take these newspapers that are still running, and there are more, but add them up, their daily readership, you probably don't even have 1 million people reading these newspapers. But also, what are they not doing? They're not, they're reporting as freely as they can, but they're not touching the social issues. They're not touching the buzz issues. Kommersant, RBK, they focus more on the economic side of things because, again, you can report data fairly easily and go, that don't look right. Независимая газета seems to focus a lot more on foreign policy nowadays, but it's doing it from a very, let's look at the East and the global South. So, whereas, I mean, Medusa, and who else has been closed? Coulter, I think, was shut down, wasn't it? The Bell. They were doing very different things. So it was, as Jonny was saying, it's managed autonomy. So you can be an autonomous newspaper as long as you are within these parameters. You can have your theatre within these parameters. Sorry, go on, John.
You could get away with some things.
You can get away
with increasingly editors, theatre directors, television show managers, producers. Unfortunately now, and this is why it is different, and Jonny's right to point it out, since 2022, unfortunately now you have to second guess yourself in a way that means you're going to be ultra cautious. And in fact, self-censorship is the real problem now. And probably people could get away with a lot more, but they're not going to risk it now.
Slobopatsana is a good example of that very good series.
Yeah, I think Jeremy, I'm glad you brought up the LGBT topic, because that didn't come to my mind when I was actually writing this. But you're totally right. But one of the interesting things we could talk about in Moscow in particular, I don't know about other cities. What you have now is like gay clubs, which were openly gay clubs, are no longer gay clubs. They're still gay clubs, but it's not called that. There's no rainbow flags or anything. Just if you try and go in with a girl, the doorman will let the guy in, but not the girl in. So it's sort of through different routes where they've kept their private life, but the public sphere is just totally different now, and that has intensified. Yes, it started a decade ago now, but it's intensified a lot since 2022. And I think we can talk about moral and sort of cultural regulation the same way, where the government does stop people from acting in certain ways, listening to certain things, watching to certain things in public, but in private, people are not following it. People are doing their own things. But of course, you can't avoid it. So when you're surrounded by these things all the time, it will influence you, especially when the government uses its connection, the Orthodox Church, to control people in a different way.
If only it could, because church attendances are quite low generally speaking. I mean, they've got the church. I mean, you cannot deny they are still very powerful. They have at least 2 television channels now, and you have popular priests and sort of Kremlin-favored priests and things like that. But again, I mean, it's very interesting debates about spirituality in Russia, because at school they're taught the 4 religions of the motherland. Christianity, Islam, Judaism, Buddhism. Okay, those are like the inherited religions, not imported religions. More of the focus is because the Orthodox Church used to be the unifying. I was talking about earlier. It was a unifying force. Russians were Orthodox, and Orthodox Christians were Russians. The language, Christianin, peasant, Christianin, Christian, deliberately very, very similar. And they're also nouns rather than adjectives, which I think is interesting just as a linguist there. Go on, Jeremy.
Well, I mean, we should do a whole podcast on religion and belief, because again, it's belief more than religion.
Right.
That's important. I would love to do that. We've touched on that is part of moral regulation, and you mentioned various things about TV and the official church. There's also, of course, quite an active orthodox, or rather socially conservative oligarch. But again, we should maybe round up by saying how little this cuts through, as Jonny has already indicated with the example of LGBT. Gay people don't disappear just because you say that they should, right? And I kind of wanted to end on that note, to say that maybe we should talk about religion and faith and belief in the future. But we've covered the 4 topics, unless anybody else has something to add.
No, I just think I'd like to conclude by saying that I think the overall point here is that the Russian state, if you live in Russia, it's just an ever-present. It educates, protects, provides, but it also observes, it directs and decides. And I think for many people, that's a trade-off for stability, a life where everything works. But then if you start asking who's doing the work behind the curtain, then maybe things are a little bit more complicated. And maybe that's the real genius of the system. You never have to choose between comfort and control, because they're basically the same thing.